Hey everyone, it's Sunday today out here at the Arvada Skate Park. Looking to get a pretty good session in and do a final review of the Pat Ritter Them 909s. Thanks for checking in. Welcome back, friends. So today I want to do a final review of the Them 909s. I've been skating the Pat Ritters for about 6 months now and wanted to mainly give final impressions. I know a lot of reviews out there give kind of initial impressions, but you know, with the way skates are these days, I feel like you really have to give a chance for components to break in, see how everything rides in the long duration before giving a review. And you know, I know in the past a lot of skates would turn over every few months once inventory sold out, then it's kind of on to the next thing. So after you've skated something for a few months, there's no point giving a review because those skates are no longer on the market. These days it kind of seems like skates are sticking around a little bit longer. Part of that could be production issues. Either way, you know, Them is putting together skates with different shells, different liners, but the main boot, the main frame, the wheels, all of that is staying the same. So a lot of this review is going to carry over to those skates, and hopefully it helps people in a similar situation where they're coming back from a long period of skating and wanting to know, are Them's right for me? So Them skates, they come with round laces. This brand comes with, or this model comes with Ritter Intuition liners, which is made specifically for this boot. The boot itself is a brown color, comes with the Them 909 frames, cream color, and then comes with the Them wheels in a flat setup. So I've customized these, and I will get into that here in a little bit. And part of what I did to customize these is I've lowered the cuff, I've changed out laces to a flat hockey lace that's waxed, and then I've also changed out the middle wheels to anti-rockers. So talking about the wheels, you know, the wheels that come with it, I found to actually be a really durable wheel. They're 58 millimeter 90A, and I've ridden these both flat and anti-rocker. And one thing I noticed when riding flat is that these wheels basically did not wear down at all when skating a park. And that's typically how I skate, is just at a park these days. Once I changed to anti-rocker, these wheels already had a little bit of wear on them. I did notice a lot more exponential deterioration from them, but I didn't notice anything like cracking, coring, the cores themselves getting wallowed out and wobbly where the bearings were loose in them. In fact, when I rode the wheels, I don't know if you can tell here, but here's a brand new one, and next to it is one that's been worn down, and I basically wore it down. There's a wasp. Wore it down to the point where I was starting to ride on my anti-rockers. So I called it quit for this set of 4, and I've switched to just trying to finish out the other 4 wheels that came as the flat setup. So really, I guess, let me back up. So part of what I've heard is that there was a set of them wheels that came out that were really bad pours and led to quite a bit of issues with the wheels. I have not experienced that with these. I from getting back into skating, these wheels are among some of the best that I've used, and I've ridden Undercover, Dead, what other ones, Red Eye wheels, and I feel like the pour on these is right up there. And because they come as a stock wheel, you usually can pick up a set for pretty cheap. I think I was able to pick up 8 extra Ritter wheels for like $35. So overall, these wheels rode great for me flat or anti-rocker. So what comes in the wheels are just kind of an ABEC 5 bearing. I believe that's them stock bearing, but I really haven't had an issue with these with speed. Once I got back into skating, I rode the REMS HR 2.5s, and the bearings were the same ABEC in the REMS, but they were so noticeably slower that I ended up having to replace those in the short duration I rode those skates. Have not experienced that. These bearings feel great. Great for anti-rocker or flat skating. So part of the Pat Ritters too is they come with the new V3 sole plates, and the V3s changed the backside groove and also extended the sole plate a little bit. Now, one thing about the sole plate to note is that the sole plate is just dead flat. And one thing I felt like I noticed is that when skating rails, it didn't matter how wide that sole plate was, I felt locked in. But when skating ledges, I felt like because the sole plate was extended and dead flat, one thing that I had to do is when I got on the ledge, I had to basically wear down a certain portion of the sole plate so that way the sole could kick a little over the ledge, and then that way I was more centered on my balance. Because otherwise, for the first little bit skating these, it was like jump on, but because it was completely 90-degree angle, that my weight was shifted outward of the ledge, and that just kept like bucking me off after riding, I don't know, maybe 8 feet or so. So once I got a little more wearing, and I don't know if you can see that, but there's small kind of chamfer on the outside from me being able to kick my foot over a little more. Otherwise, like the sole plates, one thing to notice is that the backside plate doesn't really line up with the frame, and I personally feel like the way that I skate, my groove is basically in line with the center of the frame. So this wasn't riding that great for me, but also I've got pretty bad knees, so I'm not hitting boot down a lot. You can see some minor grooves in here, but it's not anything crazy. Moving on to the them frames, one thing I liked about the frames is just how solid they are. Very thick walls, they've got the stiffeners, very wide, shallow H-block, and you can tell these things are solid. One thing I noticed about riding these is when doing a lot of pushing off, I could feel that because the frames are so solid, there's absolutely no give in them. So it transfers all the give to the wheels, and I would notice like creaking and squeaking here and there from just, I felt like it was the bearings moving inside the wheels, but I didn't notice any of the bearings actually being loose when riding them. them frames, when you buy them stock, they have this tiny groove kind of on the outsides, but after you wear that in, that kind of disappears. And that's one of the biggest gripes I have with these frames, is the plastic is so hard that, I just had a problem getting like a groove inside of it. And once that plastic kind of on the sidewalls eroded, I find myself actually popping out of tricks, mostly when I was skating round components, so like rails, coping. And I think part of that too is because this is so shallow that the wear isn't really happening in the middle. It's kind of happening on the sides, but for whatever reason, it's breaking in a weird way where it's just allowing my foot to slip off versus locking it in. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is just the intuition liner. So my understanding is that this intuition liner is basically made specifically for the them boot. And I'll just be clear, like, I have not ridden any other intuition liners, so I don't know how those liners would actually fit inside this boot. All I can speak for is how this liner fits in this boot, because that's the only thing I know when I've skated. Foam pad on the bottom, great shock absorption, never had any issues with that. I feel like I was able to cinch up the them liners, the intuitions, with pretty good ease. Felt like my foot was like properly secured in here. And really the only thing that I've noticed is that after skating them for a while, some of the fabric I can tell is just kind of delaminating from the foam inside. I haven't really noticed any specific issues from that, but that's really the only thing that I've noticed. These were pretty bright white and they're turning kind of a brown color now. Inside the shells themselves, they normally come with this black plastic piece, and I found with skating these thems inside the shell, the more that the liners actually broke in, the looser the liner felt inside the shell. So basically it was the liner was contouring to my foot so well that as these broke in, I was able to cinch these up and tighten them around my foot, but that just meant that there was less volume with the liner inside the shell. And actually about a month and a half ago, I was running into a huge issue where the liners were so loose in my shell that I was trying to figure out what's going on. What do I do to fix this, because it didn't seem right. 6 months for a skate, I feel like that's not that long of a time. So what I ended up doing is dropping the cuff down, using some, I think I called them hockey laces earlier, but I found some 48 centimeter waxed roller skating laces, and I used that, and ended up using the 4mm intuition pads, insoles that come with the liners, and these are starting to actually like peel apart now after just riding them for about a month and a half, and use that inside just to get it cinched down tight enough to be able to skate. And I feel like part of the problem with that is with the contour of the boot. So if you look at these intuition liners, they're pretty flat, and then they have this pretty subtle transition up to the ankle, and then the foam itself is pretty thin. And when you look at the them skates, it's pretty fat, along the toe box, and then it has a pretty drastic curve up, and then it transitions to this really wide cuff area. And one thing I've noticed with a lot of people who skate thems is that they'll use hockey laces, they wrap it around, and that's supposedly to fix the heel lift. And so what I think is happening is that the liners that are going in the shells aren't really sized for the shells. I think the shells are way too oversized and contain too much volume, so that once the liners pack in, there's just too much displacement within here. And I've been able to resolve that just by lowering the cuff, changing the laces, and using this insole. But I feel like that's a lot of work for a skate that you're paying anywhere between $300 and $500 for. I've never ridden the them liners, so I can't really speak for them. All I can speak for is the Intuition liners, because that's the only thing I've ridden with the them skates. As far as flex goes, I feel like the plastic in the thems provide plenty of flex. I feel like they almost had too much flex once the liners broke in, just because of how big the skate was and my liner being able to move around in there, inside the boot. Another kind of pet peeve that I have about the boot is when the liner was in the high position or the low position, the cuff really digs inside the laces. And I find myself having to replace the laces about once a month, just because that repetitive forward and backward cuff motion ends up just cutting through the laces, and then they're toast. And I'll be honest, I've never had a problem with that with any skate I've ever ridden. So that to me tells me that there's probably a minor issue with the way that this skate is contoured. And I just feel like, with the cuff, it's maybe too big of a diameter, because I find myself having to cinch the top part so much just to help prevent heel lift, that I feel like part of it could be resolved by trimming how wide this portion is, and maybe using like a smaller cuff bolt. So I'm really drawing a blank on what this thing is called right now. Strap, who knows, whatever. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I've noticed just with these is the volume. A lot of people have complained that the hardware on the them skates is pretty cheap because it either strips, it falls out. It's pretty common for using, most of this seems like it's like pretty cheap and soft aluminum. So, most of that is pretty common with that kind of material. I ended up using thread lock on the cuff bolts, and I find myself having to reapply it every month and a half. But once applying that thread lock, the problem seems to go away. But it's kind of annoying that you have to go out, spend $10 on the thread lock, put it on the bolts, wait 24 hours before you can skate them, just to alleviate something that should be coming from the manufacturer in a manner that works. What else can I say about these? Love the colors. Once I got them dialed in, they felt really great. Going back to the frames, since I do have bad knees, I've really put an honest effort into trying these flat. And I just felt that I was getting way too much wheel bite with the way that I skate. And, are the frames great? Yeah, they're good. I feel like they need a little bit deeper of a groove in them and a little more sidewall groove, because that's really going to help you lock in. But for me, I don't think I can ever ride flat. I've been looking at, maybe getting some Wish frames, but I can only comment on what I've ridden so far. And, when I land a trick in these, it's great. When I miss a trick, it's usually a pretty hard fall, and I'm swearing like a sailor. But I do feel like, there could be some adjustments, because I feel like these could really benefit from a little bit deeper of a groove. There's no question about how sturdy these skates are. They've lasted me 6 months. I've seen very little wear on them, which is crazy for how much I've ridden the park. But I don't think park wears skates the same way that riding street does. I'm not out hitting concrete ledges. I'm not doing any kind of crazy kink rails. And part of that is just because I'm old now. Try to minimize my injuries, still have a fun time doing what I do. In general, I think, it took me like 4.5, 5 months to figure out how to get these configured in a way that worked for me. And, once I got it dialed in, they're good skates. Like, I'm going to continue riding them for a couple more months, and I'll probably switch up to try something else out, just to get that diversity of what's on the market. But yeah, I will say that, the biggest gripe for me is if you pay $500 for a pair of skates, which I did back in February, is you expect the hardware to be good, everything on it to be solid. And, from everything that I've read about them's, and most skates on the market these days, is you're almost always having to do some sort of customization, and that's either changing liners, changing frames, changing wheels, changing something. And maybe it's just older, maybe we have more money and we're being a lot more picky, I don't know. But once I got these dialed in, I feel like they were still a really good skate. And I had a fun time sessioning them today before I did this review. Wasn't sure how that was going to go because I dinged my leg on a handrail the other day pretty good. And so I thought it would be pretty good, but I got some good tricks. I got a sweat stance on a banked ledge, and that's a trick I haven't really done in how long, like 12 years maybe. So so solid. Like, once I made these adjustments, I feel like these skates are way more responsive. What else is there to say about these? Them skates, I mean, they're obviously here to last. John Julio, he's put a lot of time and effort into designing these. Do I think they could use some tweaks that will play out better for the long run? Absolutely. I feel like they could reconfigure the shell a little bit, close up this cuff area, because it seems like most of the liners are thinner liners, so there's no point having a shell that is so much more volume than what the packed in liner will be. Mainly what I wanted to do today is just provide a review, let people know what my experience has been with these for the last 6 months, and hopefully this is helpful. I've really enjoyed these skates. Final closing comments, I recommend them. But I will say that if you do buy them, have an expectation that you will have to do some customization that make them work for you. I guess that's all I have to say about these. Thanks for checking in.